recently posted a newsletter for my InPower Women Mastermind community with the subject line, "Are women just broken men?" And this concept came to me from an aha I had when I realized some of my own biases related to women's reality in the workplace and mostly how the workplace standardizes on a male standard for what human beings need physically in their bodies, which treats women's needs or anybody that is not able-bodied, their needs, as something in need of an accommodation. So basically everybody that isn't a healthy male and whatever their needs might be are just considered kind of broken men, which is why women get disability leave to have a baby, even though having a baby is not a disability. It is a normal and natural and needed function of the human female body. So in the mastermind community, I explored this question of workplaces standardizing on the male reality and what it might mean to think about workplace standards that were based on either the female reality or a human reality that included both male and female needs and everyone's needs when they weren't necessarily physically at their best. So in this video, I explore a little bit of the logic that kind of got me to this and came up with some advice for myself and for my clients and for everybody else out there about ways to think about our needs as whole human beings, including our physical selves in the workplace, and in a way that helps us assert our own power and also in a way that helps give our companies and our employers opportunities to support us more than they do today. I hope you enjoy this. I think this topic about how do we design workplaces that are really designed for women, because workplaces are not, they're designed for men. And we could have an argument about should they be designed for women, or what does it look like to have them designed for men and women? Here's a thought. But I think what my big aha was, and part of the reason I put this topic out for consideration, is that in my own thinking on this topic, I have realized how much I personally have internalized the biases against women in the context of the workplace. And my aha, which I put in the newsletter, it was really that I read, it happened to be the US Army of all things. I read the Army's guidance on how to take care of female soldiers in general in combat situations and when they're pregnant. And I just had this kind of mental lock where I'm like, why are we bending over backwards for these women? Because nobody bent over backwards for me in the workplace when I had my children. Like this little script goes off in my head and I start listening to it going, oh my God, listen to me. I have internalized all the stuff like, well, women should just shut down all their needs and show up in the workplace as though they're not women. Because they don't have these needs. We don't have periods. We don't have menopause. When we have a baby, we just kind of like ignore that fact in the workplace. When in reality, these are very important things to us personally and to our lives. And as they start to come out and be discussed more among women and in the society more generally, I'm gaining an appreciation for how much I've shut down my own, I'm going to say needs, not that I was terribly needy or am terribly needy, but by not bringing it to work with me, I was not making a lot of these aspects of being a woman a part of my whole life experience, including the workplace. And I thought that was okay. And I thought that was appropriate. And that realization made me think, well, wait a minute, what would it look like if we didn't do that? If we brought our whole selves to the workplace, including our bodies and what happens to our bodies, which is different than what happens to men's bodies. What if we brought that to work and didn't ask to be accommodated, but asserted what we needed to be the most effective people in our careers and in our jobs? I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I want to keep thinking about it. I'm very open to everybody's opinions on it. And the question kept coming up for me, is there a male equivalent to pregnancy where the workplace accommodates men in a way it doesn't accommodate women? And that's a struggle when you think about it, because pregnancy is one of those biggest accommodations, and the woman bears the burden of that physically. And workplaces are doing a better job at giving paternity leave or family leave, which is appropriate and good. I think that begins to address that inequity. But in the United States, anyway, we're still very bad at this in terms of how we do leave. Matter of fact, one of my clients is in this situation right now, and she's applying for her leave and has her leave plan. And she's realizing she's getting very little support from the company from the standpoint of like, what is a leave plan? Like, what do you want from me? And there's no templates and there's no examples and the process isn't very good, et cetera. And I have some other clients who've been getting a little more support in that mode. But I think the point is, from a company standpoint, this is still very much evolving. And just because you get family leave doesn't mean you feel supported, both formally by the policies and informally by, people's opinions. And the only example I could think of that was similar for men, maybe, I mean, it's very different, but, when a woman is pregnant and she has to take time off to have her child and then to be with her child, whether that's 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months or more, she's gone for a while and the company has to deal with her absence from her job. Make sure other people cover the work and manage around that. And that's a strain on the company. Or if you company or organization, your goal is to do stuff, to make money, to produce things, to have an impact as a nonprofit, that having an employee out for any reason is an issue, is a problem. It's a management conundrum. And so you could sort of sit there and go, well, why should we accommodate women who have children by creating this pain on our company? Well, they're your employees and they're doing something important for society, which is continuing society, but putting children out there. And there's a lot of stats that say fewer women are doing this, fewer couples are doing this, fewer couples are making commitments to family, much less children. And so as a social good, we want children, we want to perpetuate our society. And that's a whole nother conversation. So you could say it's a social good, but it's also the right thing for that human being who has a life outside your company. So what is there as a similar situation for men? And when I wrote the blog post, I didn't think of it, but subsequently I thought it's true for women too, but many more men might be in the National Guard. I happen to know one who was the CEO of a company. He was a former military and he was in the National Guard. And in the Iraq War, he was deployed for 2 years and they kept his job open. He kept his job as CEO for 2 years, even though he wasn't there. And that's an example of where a man has to be accommodated. Now, there are many more women having children than there are men deploying into war zones in the National Guard, thank God. But it's an example of where we ask our companies to pay that price for the contribution to society that kind of deployment means. And companies do it, basically legally bound to do it. But most of the companies I know are happy to do it because when that happens, there's a reason. But I still have the same kind of bias from a business standpoint. Well, wait a minute. Why should the company not just refill that slot for the CEO and the guy comes back, he's got to get a new job, right? Well, it's the right thing to do. And so anyway, I mentioned this just to say that there are some analogies, I guess, for men. It's very different. Not sort of because they're men, it's because they're in the National Guard in that case. And there are a few examples of that for men because they're men. Now, there are men with mental health problems that need to be accommodated. There are, just like there are with women, there are men who have physical problems, disabilities, temporary or permanent, or other kinds of things that need to be accommodated, just like there are women. And I think as a whole, our commercial society, our business culture, let me say that, doesn't do well supporting human beings who don't show up as cogs in their wheel. But because business culture was created by men, it tends to favor the needs of men and standardize on them. And I think that's the key, which is our business culture has standardized on the male culture, and everything that isn't the male culture and the male body in this case is an aberration. It needs an accommodation. And I would say the able-bodied man. So what would it look like to standardize on a human body, a human set of needs that are our employees? To be honest, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question because humans aren't standard. And we see a difference between men and women that lets us know that there are differences. And women have, because we bear the burden of physically creating children, we have a different reality. And to standardize on women or just create a standard that would encompass women's needs would be a significant change from what we have today. And as I said, I don't know the answer, but here's my conclusion, what I want to suggest to all of us who are thinking about this and thinking about it more deeply, which is just when you find yourself, and this is advice to myself too, when you find yourself wanting to put your own needs aside, physical or otherwise, physical, mental, family, whatever, ask yourself, well, wait a minute, do I need this to be addressed in some way? I don't want to say accommodated. Do I need to address this some way in my professional life for me to be the best I can be in my job? And what would that look like? What would it look like for me to do my job as effectively as possible, to produce the result I'm being paid to produce and still have my needs met? Because if we can answer that question for ourselves as individuals and ask that of our companies, we begin to tell the companies what it looks like to be able to support the human beings that work for us. You're probably going to get a lot of people saying no. And like in the newsletter, there's this debate over getting period leaves. When you have your period, should you get a day off? I don't know where I land on that, honestly. I spent my whole life working while I had a period, and I felt like I managed just fine. Had I had the chance to take a day off and then work harder another day of the month, that might have been a great idea. It never occurred to me. I don't even know how to think about that. So if it would help enough women and enough women could still do their jobs and produce their results, there's probably some solutions out there. So both for us and for our work culture, I think it's a good thing if we really ask ourselves, what do we need? What do I need to perform at my best? And it may not be the same thing every day. This was one of the other things that was an aha for me. I did not realize that the male hormonal cycle was a 24-hour cycle and the female hormonal cycle, which I did realize, was a 28-day cycle. And right there, the more we learn about hormones, the more we realize the impact it can have on us physically, mentally, our productivity, everything. Right there is a way to think about, well, what is your cycle, not just your hormonal cycle, but your cycle of energy? When are you able to produce your best? Under what condition? Can you ask for what you need from your company so that you can produce your best, whether it's on a 28-day cycle or something else entirely? And again, the more aware we become of how to produce our best and how to be our best, and the more we can articulate what we need in order to do that to others in our workplace, in our home, the more the world has a chance to not accommodate us, but support us. And so at the end of the day, I think that's work we need to do for ourselves. And frankly, we need to do for society. So I leave that with you as a challenge. I think it means something different to each of us. And I very much would enjoy your thoughts on that if you want to email them to me or talk to me about them in a client call or something like that. Well, we're taking August off, so I will see you in the mastermind in September. Take care. Have a great summer.